everybody. Good morning. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Alicia. I'm going to be talking to you today, as mentioned, about how our standards fit together and how we're looking at evolving our standards over time into the future to make sure that we're ready for whatever is coming into the future of payments. So who was at the community meeting in Dublin last year? Show of hands. Show of hands. Okay, quite a few people. You might remember this slide. Had this slide in last year's presentation as well. I quite like this slide because it talks to how we have already been evolving our standards and grown our standards over time. We haven't just stayed still. We've started back in the days of 2005 with the standards of PCI DSS and PCI PED, as it was at the time. We now call it POI. And that's evolved over time. Those standards have evolved, and you can see that we've had iterations on those standards. Little triangles are minor revisions, little squares are major revisions. But we haven't just kept with those standards. We've increased those standards as there's been a need to grow specific requirements for specific areas of payments technology and security. And you can see that as they've grown, they have also evolved. And so we have this kind of triangle that grows out there. Well, how do these particular items fit together, and how do they work together to help us in a holistic view of a payment process to help secure payments across the chain? So I actually presented this slide last year as well, and this slide shows how we've got individual areas for our standards in terms of requirements around key management for PCI PIN, for example, requirements around card production for how you produce a card or a payment instrument, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on potentially. We've got HSM requirements, or hardware security module requirements, that are used at back ends for processing. Kind of in the middle, we've got how you actually conduct a transaction, or how a transaction is performed. So around P2PE with a PTS POI, around the XPOC standards, or SPOC, CPOC, MPOC, 3DS SDK, and of course software that exists as well. So I think this standard is pretty self-explanatory and covers everything. So I'm going to leave this up for the next, I think I've got about 17 minutes, and talk amongst yourselves, see what you think of this. So thank you very much. I suppose I'll keep on going then. So I have to admit, I have to apologize, I think is the best term. You've seen all of this before. You've seen the slide that I presented initially with all of our standards before. You saw that last year. You've seen this slide before. You saw that last year as well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you some things we have only just started to talk about publicly at our community meetings. So these are things you probably have not seen before. When you look at this slide and you see, okay, it kind of makes sense. We've got PCI PIN requirements for key management for PINs. We've got card production requirements, as I said. You've got the standards in the middle. But they've been developed in a way that is addressing a specific need at a time. And that was shown on that first slide, that slide that kind of grew over time. We needed requirements for mobile. Okay, let's create some mobile requirements. We need requirements for how to conduct a secure end-to-end transaction. Let's create those in P2PE. What we haven't been able to do is kind of take a step back and say, are these the right set of standards? Are these the right set of requirements to help us moving forward into the future? What does the future of payments look like? Because one of the things when you look at this slide and that previous slide is you might be thinking, oh, there's a lot of standards there. Maybe you're new to PCI and it's all just a little bit too confusing. There's so much stuff out there. And what we don't want to keep on doing is creating a new standard that is potentially replicating something we've already got in part or whole almost, just to suit a new type of technology. We want to be able to anticipate a little bit what is coming down the pipe. So what do I mean by that? Who here has been participating in our RFC, our request for comment processes? Okay, next year if I'm here, or next year at the EU meeting, I want to see everybody's hand up. I saw a few. It's really important. I'll talk about how important that is for us. But it's really important to help us know that we're getting these things right. We're getting these standards right. We're getting the content right. We're understanding what is coming. We need your input here because you are the people who are on the ground actually creating technology, processing the transactions. You understand what's going on, and we need that input from you. But if you look at this slide, what you might notice now is, by golly, there's been a lot of RFCs recently, hasn't there? There's been quite a few. We've had RFCs for POI and some for DSS, and we've released a minor revision for that, for version 4.0.1 of DSS. We have RFCs for HSM and point-to-point, and TSP, and SDK, and core, and secure software, and secure software lifecycle, and MPOC. That's quite a lot, really, isn't it? And that's part of what was being talked about just before when we're talking about taking a step back and looking at our standards portfolio. Because when we look at that portfolio and we look at those standards that we have right now, that's all illustrated here on the screen, those in green there, that set of standards, this is what we have right now. But is this correct moving into the future? And so we've been hearing from our stakeholders what is needed into the future, what areas of technology we might need to be thinking about to make sure we're securing, and how we can group potentially some of these standards together. We've been hearing that from principal participating organizations. We've been hearing that from our associate participating organizations. Been hearing that from our assessors, from our whole stakeholder community. And once again, we need to hear that information. We need to hear that from you. If you have thoughts, ideas, participate in the RFCs, come to the booth while we're here, have a chat. That's why we are here in this event. Sure, we're here to present information to you, and that's great, and I hope you learn something and we convey useful information to you. But we're also here to hear you, to get information from you so that we can evolve our standards. So when we look at what we have right now, we're saying, okay, that's what we have right now, it's great. Last 18 years, we've been evolving these. They've worked really well. But let's take a step back. Let's look at our whole portfolio of standards and think about the target areas we might want to address into the future. And so those target areas shown in orange here on the screen, areas around key management, areas around physical device security, around payment cards or payment instruments. So for example, when I talk about those, we're evolving from a situation where people would use a physical plastic card to where, you know what, we still kind of call it a card, but you know what, it might be a phone, it could be a watch, it could be a sticker, there's lots of different things. There's payment instruments, things you use to make a transaction. Environmental security, software development and process security, mobile security, payment solution security, and emerging technology frameworks. So that's where we think the target areas are. These aren't necessarily names of standards or things that will be in the future. However, they're the areas we want to move to. So we already have some things around this at the moment. If we look at, for example, physical device security, we have our PTS POI standards, we have our PTS HSM standards, both of which have gone through RFCs recently, and in fact, POI is in a second RFC. They have requirements around physical security, electronic security, tamper detection, these sorts of things. That is not going to go away. Increasingly, we're seeing people use software to make payments. That is not going away either. That's going to continue, but software doesn't run itself. You don't take software and throw it up in the air and have it execute. You need something for it to run on. And there's always going to be a context where you need some hardware, potentially physically secure hardware, to execute that. So we want to make sure we continue that thread across from the standards we have now, POI, HSM, to something around hardware physical security devices. Almost all of our standards talk about key management and cryptography. Cryptography is an underlying control across many security standards, not just ours, many of them, but certainly within ours. Now, the primary standard we have that talks to key management is PCI PIN. But we have key management requirements in a card production standard. We have key management requirements in our token service provider standards. We have key management requirements in PCI DSS. We have key management requirements in P2PE. We have key management requirements in SPOC and MPOC and CPOC and so forth. So does it make sense for us to continually have, within a certain standard, if we produce a new standard, to create new or copy over key management requirements? Or does it make sense for us to have a separate standard that talks about key management, that other standards can reference, so that we're not continually reinventing the wheel? It also allows us to have a more standardized process and so forth. So taking requirements out of those standards or referencing those requirements, learning from those requirements, looking at how key management and cryptography have evolved, and building that into new standards moving forward, or at least a consolidated standard. I mentioned payment cards and payment card instruments. So we have our card production requirements. We also have TSP, so token service provider. When we talk about a mobile phone making a payment or a watch making a payment, they'll often have a token in them. So tokenization is kind of part of the card production experience these days as well. And so can we evolve those into something that is consolidated and talks around payment cards, payment card instruments, and thinks about how that payment instrument has evolved over time from something that had pretty much just a magnetic stripe on it, no chip. Certainly back in the early days, 2005, it probably in lots of places didn't have an EMV chip on, even if it did have a chip. Whereas these days, a lot of transactions are not only EMV-based, primarily, but they're also mobile-based. For example, in Australia, where I'm from, almost half of the transactions that are performed in a face-to-face context are performed with somebody using a mobile phone, not a physical card. Environmental security, once again, another underlying core control that sits across a number of our standards. Obviously, the main standard we would look at here is PCI DSS. Who's familiar with PCI DSS out there? Okay, some of you don't have your hands up. Once again, I'm going to repeat myself. You were in the wrong conference. If you don't know what PCI DSS is, you probably should be down the street or something. I don't know. Barcelona's really nice. I don't know why you're here. But if you're looking at PCI DSS, that's our core standard around environmental controls. But we have environmental controls in other standards as well. We have environmental controls that are referenced in some of our XPOC standards, like MPOC, for environments that are doing attestation and monitoring but don't necessarily have PAN data. There are environmental controls in card production and PIN around how you secure, for example, where you're storing sensitive data for cards or where you're doing the loading of cryptographic keys. Can we look at how we can consolidate those down, once again, into a single point of reference and make sure that we're being consistent, or where we say, you know what, this particular area of payments, this needs a little bit more security than something else, so we might deviate. But when we deviate with a deliberate intent. We take an overarching view of our standards and we say, this one needs to be different from this one, not this one potentially is accidentally different from the other one. Software, once again, core. Everything runs software these days. I often hear people when they talk about POIs or HSMs or something, it's right there in the name, hardware security module, but guess what? It sure does run software. Software is in everything. It's increasingly and excessively rare to find anything these days that just has hardware and doesn't have software in it. I can't even think of anything really in payments that would do that. Your routers have software in them. So software, core control. We have a lot of standards with software, and these are actually the core ones here, but if you look at POI, has software requirements, HSM has software requirements, DSS has software requirements. Can we pull all of those across and think about how we can be consistent where we can, but deviate deliberately where is necessary? Mobile, as I mentioned, is going to keep on evolving. Physical devices to accept payments, sure, they exist, they're going to continue to exist. I don't see those dying away into the future, but equally, mobile devices are increasingly not only used to make a payment in terms of payment instrument, but to accept a payment as well. And when I cast my mind back to when I first started in this industry, a very long time ago. I was actually, the first job I had at a university, once again, I won't specify, but it was a few decades, let's put it at that. It was working on a mobile payment device. Probably a little bit early, didn't really take off. However, from there, we have seen mobile payments increase and increase in terms of acceptance in the market. And that trajectory, to me, reminds me of the trajectory I've seen in Australia, where we've gone from plastic cards with MSRs to chip cards, which do EMV, to now, as I said, almost half of transactions being performed with a person using a mobile device as a payment instrument. Is that the same trajectory we're going to see in payment acceptance? Maybe. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the future holds, but we do have standards for this, and I don't think mobile is going to go away. So we need to continue to evolve these as well. Payment solution security. What I mean by this is the end-to-end security of the payment transaction. Obviously, P2P does this, but also some of our COTS-based standards talk about securing the transaction and so forth. Can we bring those together in some way? That's something that we're looking at, how to evolve, be consistent where we can, but also deviate where necessary. That brings us to the emerging technology framework. What is that? What does that mean? So I mentioned we don't have a crystal ball. Shouldn't be a surprise. But what that means is I don't know what you folks out there who are building products and technologies are going to be doing today, tomorrow, a year from now, 3 years from now. How do we as a Standards Council have a standard for something that doesn't exist yet? And what we're looking at doing, what we're considering is, well, you know what? We may not know what you're doing, but we probably know some of the core controls that you're going to have baked into this. It's probably going to have key management. It's probably going to have software. It might run on a mobile device. It might run on a physically secure device. So with the emerging technology framework, what we can do is we can take some of these controls that we've built up in these other key areas and make sure we have them as kind of a framework that can be used as a best practice, something that can be referenced, so that when somebody comes out with something that's new and innovative and fantastic for the payments industry, rather than it taking some time for us to develop a standard around that, we can say, oh, great, it's got cryptography, it's got physical device, it runs on a mobile, it's got some software in there as well, that's fantastic, you've got a back end, needs environmental controls. We have standards all for that. We have controls all for that. They can be picked and chosen and then used as a best practice for people to develop that. That gives us not the crystal ball, but the ability to adapt rapidly to that technology as it comes out. So, there's an REM song I don't expect many people to know. It's not one of their most popular ones. You can't get there from here. So, where we are right now and where we want to get, there's a journey we need to take. We can't jump to these orange target areas immediately. We need an interim level. And that's what we're doing with all these RFCs at the moment. That is the process we're going through. We are adapting and consolidating our standards so that we have the ability to move and adapt our standards into the future. You can see here some purple areas in terms of, for example, third-party applications to be run on POI devices. In terms of KMO and ESS, they have little asterisks next to them, names to be finalized, but KMO, Key Management Operations, a consolidated key management standard. ESS, Environmental Security Standard. These are the things we're looking at evolving into the future. But it's not just about the standards. When we've got a standard, well, there might be a program that's associated with that as well. There might be training that's associated with that as well. We need to make sure they're aligned where they can be as well. We've seen some of this recently. We've been modularizing our training so that you don't have to go through the same training each and every time if you've already done parts of it. You can just do the modules that are applicable to something new that you're doing. But it's not just us either. We're not just a Security Standards Council that works independently of everything else within its own little bubble. We need to work with the wider industry. We need to work with other people, with our stakeholders, the TGG, the Technology Guidance Group, the Roadmap Roundtable Group, the Board of Advisors, the Global Executive Assessor Roundtable. Lots of acronyms. We work with external standards bodies as well, like FIDO at EMVCO. I've got a talk coming up tomorrow where I'll be talking about some of the FIDO things. Working with the industry at large, with some of the experts who'll be talking over the course of this week. Because they're your standards too. Our job is not just to publish standards and say, that's great, we produced a document, that's fantastic. Our job is to secure the payments industry, to help secure the payments industry through the development of these standards and programs. So we're updating all of these. We're updating our programs. We're updating our training. Keep an eye on the blogs and the info that we put out. We're aligning where possible. We're deviating where necessary. But importantly, what I want to see, there are more RFCs coming. And I want to see people putting their hands up saying, I have participated in those RFCs, because as we develop these standards into the future, the way we get the best standards we possibly can is with all of you telling us what we need. So you need to participate. It's never been a better time to be a PO, because this is the first time we have gone through that process of updating our standards with a holistic view, and we need to take this journey not by ourselves, but together with you as well. Thank you very much.